Darkness only responds to darkness. I'm Daredevil.
I watched the trailer, man. This looks like Born Again. And the showrunner was like, there's a lot of Born Again. There's also some Guardian Devil. And my heart leapt into my throat. In order to tell Guardian Devil, I borrowed from so many sources, right? So when you get borrowed from, you're like, there you go. The wheel keeps turning.
Thanks to Netflix's acclaimed Daredevil series, Matt Murdock is a hot commodity once again.
This is a war I need to fight alone. My way.
Back in the late 90s, not so much. In fact, The Devil of Hell's Kitchen was on the verge of cancellation when Kevin Smith essentially saved the character. So how did Kevin Smith, the indie filmmaker behind Clerks and Chasing Amy, not only save Daredevil from cancellation, but in the process put the comics industry on Hollywood's radar? It all started with the two founders of Marvel Knights, Jimmy Palmiotti and Joe Cassano.
So the boys, I had met them on Mallrats. They did opening artwork of Jay and Silent Bob with Ash behind them for the credit sequence. And the boys were also in Chasing Amy, Jimmy and Joe. They knew that I liked Miller's Daredevil. Whenever we geeked out about comics, that always came up.
Frank Miller occupies a very special place in the Daredevil pantheon. Before he redefined Batman with The Dark Knight Returns, he did the same thing for Daredevil.
So I get a call from Joe Quesada at one point going like, hey, we got these titles. Like Marvel's letting me and Jimmy run this. The lunatics are taking over the asylum. And I know you've always said that you loved Daredevil, Miller's run on Daredevil. How would you like to do it? And I was like, oh my God, I would love to. Yes. Yo, yeah, that would be so fun. I say yes to everything.
At first, it seemed like Smith's excitement may have gotten the best of him. He was in the middle of production on Dogma and missed the deadline for turning in his first Daredevil script. Then the second, then the third deadline. At that point, the filmmaker decided it was time to bow out.
So I called up Joe Cassano. I was like, hey man, I was already late, like a month late. I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this. Like, I just don't, I got so much going on. I don't wanna go anywhere near the character. Frank Miller defined it. Most people are gonna like tell me I suck at it and stuff. And he was like, oh, well, that's a bummer, man. I'm really disappointed. He's going, but like, I guess I understand. So I said, thanks, and he hung up. 20 minutes later, I got a phone call from Jimmy Palmiotti, and the tone of it was completely different from Joe. Jimmy Palmiotti's call was, you fucking piece of shit. You said yes, and we were counting on you, man. And you call up and say you can't do it because you're afraid you're not gonna be Frank Miller? F you, nobody's Frank Miller. Go undo the book. Like you said you wanted to do it, man. Don't let Joe's brokenhearted over here and stuff. And I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't mean to doubt myself.
It might have been a little saucy. I wasn't looking at it as this is Kevin Smith, the film director. I was like, I looked at it as this is our buddy who's gonna write the book. We got him the job. And now he's backing out because he doesn't have an idea.
He gave me the old coach locker room, come on, and smacked me across the face.
The problem I had was that we sold Marvel Knights, part of it, the fact that Kevin was going to be doing Daredevil. That was part of our initial pitch, was that. So we had a lot of stuff writing on the fact that Kevin was doing Daredevil. Well, obviously the call worked because the next day he had an idea, and that was Guardian Devil, and what a great idea.
So I was watching this movie called God Told Me To. And, the subject matter of it is about some killer that thinks they're being controlled by God or something like that. So when he called, I was watching that. So I was like, hey man, all right, well, what if we did a story? What if it was like Guardian Devil? Like the idea where Matt is given like the savior, the next Christ to take care of, and there are dark forces going on. And Jimmy was like, fine, whatever. You see, you're writing, just do that. And I was, all right. And that's how Daredevil began.
Working in tandem with Quesada, who was the penciler, and Palmiotti, who was inking, Smith received a crash course in comics. One of those lessons? Less dialogue.
It's a comic book, so it'd be great just to have lettering, but we had to sneak a little drawing in there somewhere. I mean, Kevin wrote a lot.
I wrote my first full Daredevil script. I think it came in at, it was nuts, like 67 pages. And Joe was just like, all right, okay, like this is how, all right, let's do this. By the end of that issue, Joe was like, you gotta do fewer panels per page. He's going, you had one page here, we had 18 panels. I can't draw that small. Nobody can, particularly with all the dialogue that you want to write.
When Smith's first issue dropped, it landed squarely in the top 10.
We knew it was a thing when Joe and I all of a sudden were on like a morning show on TV, or we're featured in some article in a newspaper. I think, MTV covered us and all that stuff. So we knew like, now we have to get issue 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, so the realization hits you with yay, and then the other part is like, oh my God, we got to get to work.
But before they could work on the next issues, the team had to fix one minor problem. The actual story didn't work.
We're going to write ourselves in the corner if this is truly a supernatural story. So I said to the boys, I was like, what if we did it, what if like the story I started telling is all in classic comic book style, a setup by somebody else. This is just the fall guy, like the demon, the baby, all that stuff is a ruse. And they're like, well, who's responsible for it? Like, who's his greatest foe? And in the comics, Kingpin was in jail at this point, so it couldn't be Kingpin. He had been utterly destroyed. So I borrowed a story element from one of my favorite comic book stories of all time, Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, when Batman goes to Gotham. There's a moment where somebody takes a meeting with Lex Luthor, and it's a 5-minute meeting for $1 million or something like that, in which the smartest criminal genius on the planet will tell you how to kill the Swamp Thing. And I always loved that. At the end of the scene, he was just like, I'll take my $1 million. So I was like, I'm gonna do that. Like, who better? Wilson Fisk knows everything about Daredevil, thanks to the classic Born Again storyline Frank Miller had done. And we know that. And I was a big continuity freak. So I was just like, okay, we can use Wilson Fisk to relay all this information to somebody else. And who would that somebody else be?
It would be Mysterio. Yes, that Mysterio, the guy with the fishbowl head. One of Spider-Man's oldest villains would be the big bad.
So with Mysterio and Daredevil and the Guardian Devil storyline, I just wanted to do Fearful Symmetry. One of my favorite Spider-Man stories of all time is the story of a Kraven's Last Hunt, but it's Mysterio on Daredevil. He would pick not his greatest villain, because Spider-Man would just crack his helmet and then it's over. He would go after somebody else's villain, somebody who had no idea, wouldn't see him coming, didn't get it whatsoever and stuff. So it came together piecemeal like that. And I told Joe and Jimmy, and they were like, Mysterio will be fun to draw, let's do that.
Against all odds and common industry practices, this Frankenstein version of the Marvel method actually worked.
Kevin was the guy, man, he would just grab something on and then go with it. And the dialogue was wonderful, and the story was wonderful. And the art, Joe, was amazing on it. I got to ink it and was happy to do it, but it was just the right combination of color and pencils and inks and writing. It's a rare thing.
We were writing and they were drawing
So like the deadline,
to the deadline, and then missing deadlines as well. But what we did get out of that was the ability to retcon our story and fix any mistakes that we didn't see, when we went to press. The best editors on the planet don't work at the big two. They're the audience.
Guardian Devil also featured one of the most heartbreaking moments in Daredevil's history, the death of Karen Page.
That was Joe's idea. I'm not putting it off on Joe, I'm not trying to pass the buck, but it was Joe's brilliant idea. He's like, look, man, and nowadays they would call that fridging or something like that. Like, you killed off the hero's character, you jerk, that's lazy writing. I could see the point of view of like, you just used her as human cannon fodder in a war between two guys in suits and stuff. And it's a totally valid argument. We didn't intend it that way.
There was another shocking moment when Daredevil threw a baby off a roof.
That was me trying to be shocking. And it's nuts when you think about it now. I mean, that's why we kept changing the story as we went along, because people were like, hey man, like, I know Matt Murdock's had his problems, but like, I ain't never seen anyone a hero throw a baby off a building. Thank God for the Black Widow.
The success of Guardian Devil went way beyond big sales. Not only did it save Daredevil, but it also served as a shot of adrenaline for comics at a time when the business was flatlining. Smith's involvement also gave comics credibility in Hollywood. Soon, producers, writers, and directors were knocking on Marvel's door, wanting to take their shot.
I remember meeting with Cassano once, like, when I moved out to Los Angeles. We went to eat at one point, and he was telling me Joss Whedon came in. And I was like, oh, Buffy. And he goes, yeah, he came in to talk about doing an X-Men book. I was like, get out of here. He goes, it's starting. You started something. I said, what did I start? And he goes, people from the other side, man. They're taking it seriously now. And I was like, oh, well, we all love comic books. He goes, no, Kevin. He's going, nobody was coming near us. And now I'm hearing from people. And now I'm hearing from like big names and stuff. And that was always the hope for Joe. Joe was like, you could be the bridge. He saw it, I didn't. You know, Joe was just like, you made it okay for people who always had those leanings to now reach out, you know, and now a conversation is easier for us to have. We can reach out to others and be like, hey, I read somewhere that you love Thor. Did you ever think about writing Thor? You know, Kevin Smith wrote Daredevil. So they had a name to throw out there, which at that point had legitimacy. Thank God they didn't do it now, because they'd be like, from the director of Tusk, Daredevil. They'd be like, we don't want any of that. But coming off of Dogma, like people were truly interested. Like, he's an artist, he's got a voice. What's he want to do next? And so Joe's point was like, you had some heat and you lent heat. But I never thought of it as that. It was never like, I'll help these guys out. It was a privilege. It was an honor, like, to be asked to write it. And after I got over my chicken fits, thanks to Jimmy, like, it was one of the greatest jobs I've ever done. You want to talk about dividends that continue paying, like, down the line? We're still talking about it 20 years later. People still think of me as, like, a comic book writer because of that.
The dark, brooding take on the Devil of Hell's Kitchen that defined the Marvel Knights Daredevil run is evident in Netflix's acclaimed adaptation. As Marvel's chief creative officer, Cassano had input on the series, and in the show's third and final season, it actually incorporated elements of the iconic Guardian Devil storyline.